everybody, welcome to the second installment of Total Market Talk. My name is David Chitel, the CEO and founder of NGL Media and the chairman and founder of the New Generation Latino Consortium. I am very pleased to be here today with my friend and colleague, Marla Skiko. She is the Executive Vice President and Director of Digital Innovation at SMG Multicultural. Before we get started, I'm going to kick it off to Marla so she could say a few words about who she is and what she does.
Thanks, David. What a warm and wonderful introduction. So I do indeed manage digital here at Starcom Media Best Group for our multicultural units. And that is working across clients and across all different digital channels, whether it be social, mobile, video, you name it. If it's in the digital realm, it's something that I touch across our client base.
So what I'm going to do is, we're going to talk a lot about total market here just to start things off. And what I'd like to do is hand it over to you so you could talk about not only specifically your role in more detail at SMG, but also the different total market sectors that you touch, and what is your overall stance on this so-called total market and how you approach it with your clients?
Yeah, so as you've been talking about and you will be talking about in this series, I think total market is probably one of the most misunderstood, often used, but can be very polarizing terms that has come to prominence in our marketplace. And I think that's because it can be taken in a variety of different ways, depending on who you talk to, depending on if you're at an agency, if you're at a client. And so it's going to be very interesting to see the kind of conversations you have and how total market is interpreted. From our standpoint, because we have specialized in multicultural and reaching multicultural audiences, whether it would be U.S. Hispanic, African American, Asian, gay, lesbian, whatever the case may be, we have such a keen eye on the fact that these groups really are becoming the majority rather than the minority here in the U.S. And so we talk all the time, and I know that you do as well, about the changing face of America. Well, it's kind of here. For a long time it's coming, America's going to look different. Well, America looks very different. And because these audience groups are so prominent, marketers really, I think, are now coming around to the idea that I need to think about America in a different way. It isn't just these small niche audience groups. These niche have come under their own, and they really are so broad. We need to figure out how do we address that, and how do we make sure what we do is relevant. So what we're spending a lot of time against is thinking about total market is really a hyper focus on people for who they are based on a whole variety of ways that you describe a person, and in our case, how do you describe yourself ethnically? And if you are a U.S. Hispanic consumer, you come from a very specific background, sometimes language plays a role. It could be the exact same language as everybody else is speaking. It could be a variety of languages, but it's cultural. At the essence, it's cultural, and we need to make sure that we are connecting, thinking about culture first, and doing so across a whole host of different audience segments. So getting that right and thinking in culture is, to us, the essence of total market, but I know very often that's not necessarily how it's interpreted by everybody. Digital is actually, when you're trying to deliver on total market, the idea is that you're being relevant to all different groups of people or individuals, regardless of their background, and you need to get it right. You need to be in culture, so to speak, depending on what that person's background is. So digital really enables that, and I think it really helps us fulfill on this idea that we create relevant experiences, and they're culturally nuanced, and we can do that more one-to-one, because that's powered by technology. And as we know, this is an extremely tech-savvy consumer. Whether we're talking about Hispanic or African American, Asian, any of these consumers lean so far forward with technology that the ability to use technology to reach consumers one-on-one is really what digital is all about, and it helps quite a bit when we're talking about being relevant regardless of who the consumer is. And really thinking about, thinking in culture and delivering that, one-to-one. So that's what we think is so powerful about digital in that regard. Well, that's interesting. So I guess that kind of depends on if you're a glass half full or a glass half empty person. The way you could look at it is actually big data enables versus eradicates total market, because basically if you're trying to reach people on an individual basis and one-to-one across all segments, you kind of need data to be able to do that. And so big data and data from a variety of different sources really is the thing that unlocks that potential, because for a long time we've been reaching multicultural consumers relying on context, relying on behavior, both of which are still hugely important. But if we start mining for data based on how these consumers are interacting with our brands, or where these consumers are registering and self-identifying, or a whole host of data sources, that really brings to the forefront this concept of data powering audience buying, which is what we are spending a ton of time over here talking about. Because truly, we're trying to buy audience, we're trying to understand what that audience does, and the only way to get to that and really to see what the potential of that can be is to find and harness data for multicultural segments. It's a huge pivot point in our industry, and the concept of focusing on data has been big, but now the concept of focusing on data and multicultural data is something we're making a huge priority, and I know the change has been happening in the marketplace beyond our agency. We're a huge proponent and a strong force in it, but it is starting to become more and more pervasive. I think stepping back and looking at it, people would probably say that multicultural data is taking longer. And I think that's just the nature of the fact that it's harder to find. It's harder to mine for. And some of the largest third-party providers, they were probably talking a lot about age and gender and some of the other qualifiers when they were trying to cultivate data well before they were looking at, do I have African American? Have I thought about Hispanic? Those questions are more recent. So I would say that it's taken a little while to catch up, and for the concept of a multicultural data market to be on the tip of more people's tongues. It certainly is on ours, but I think it's taken a while. But now, that things are starting to change. The concept of needing data that's inclusive of multicultural is becoming more commonplace. You look in the marketplace, and there's a lot of first-party data with major partners, whether they be data partners, content partners, technology partners. It is becoming more commonplace, and that's really what's going to be necessary, is to be able to harness the whole host of data, whether it's first or second or third party. It's not an or game, it's much more an and game. Asking the right questions, making sure we understand the methodology behind the data, but we're going to need all different types of data in order to be able to create audience segments across the different audience groups and do that at scale. Right. No, I mean, you perfectly said it right there. Programmatic buying is something that is so clearly so pervasive in the marketplace now, and it's got a lot of growth and momentum behind it, and that is specifically because the promise of programmatic is informed by data. You find the audience that you want to find in a whole host of areas, and that's exactly what we've needed for a really long time in order to grow scale. So it's perfectly well summarized that we want to scale and find these audience groups wherever they're spending time, and it has very little to do or less to do with language than it does finding that audience and being able to engage with them. The counterpart to that, which is often then left unsaid, is we need to be relevant when we do find them. So it's great that we have the data, it's great that we find the audience, but then when we have the opportunity, the messaging needs to make sense. It needs to be culturally informed. It needs to have, regardless of language, there should probably be a choice of languages, and we need to resonate whenever we make that connection so that we're actually making the best use of the promise of what programmatic can bring, which is smarter, more efficient, data-enabled audience buying. So if we're doing a good job, which we're trying to do on many of our clients, we've moved beyond, you develop one ad for African Americans and one ad in Spanish for Hispanics, and then you push it out there and you just hope that it works. What we're trying to do now is everything starts from a base of cultural understanding, and it's written so that it will resonate culturally regardless of which consumer or what consumer group we're talking about. But then we develop a variety of messages. For the case of U.S. Hispanic, there's more likely now to be a message that's in English, a message that's in Spanish, maybe a message that's in Spanglish, so that we have the opportunity to, on an ongoing basis, optimize based on what's working. You know, what is depends on what the key success metrics are, but which messaging has more time spent, which messaging is getting completed through the end, has better completion rate, which message is prompting more visits to a website. It depends what we're trying to get done, but we're really trying to figure out what is resonating best and not necessarily just assume for the consumer. In the process of doing that, we wind up with some messages that we could make dual language. And you could actually flip the language of the messaging within the ad itself. That gives the consumer more options. The idea is the recognition that there is no one size fits all, and we really should be developing messaging in a variety of ways, and then we'll see which works best. In combination with that, we're trying to be more dynamic in our messaging so that we respond back in kind once we have a user lean into us. And that this concept of sequential messaging, having a cadence to how you interact, that's not anything special for multicultural, but it just puts added pressure on get the message right in culture, offer a variety of languages, and then if we know someone has reached out to us or they've landed on the website and they've been shopping with us, for instance, if it's a retail client, and they were looking at shoes, next time we find that same consumer, tell them those shoes went on sale. That's just smart messaging to be more relevant for where they are in the stage of how they're interacting with us. We're trying to find that intersection of being culturally relevant and then smart about delivering relevance in terms of cadence and timing and understanding what the consumer needs. The way we think about any type of channel planning, I mean, we're very, very well aware that it is more about what the consumer does than what screen we think is important. You know, in the old days, you used to start with, let's do some television planning and then extend out and support that. That's just so funny to think about now, because what we start with is how does this consumer live and what is their appetite for media? How do they interact with media? And we're all very well aware that this is a consumer that is very, very strong. There's a strong overconsumption of all digital media enabled by technology, and because they're such super users of technology, that necessitates us to think about how to engage based on what we know they do. So for instance, we know Hispanics and African Americans are much more likely to overconsume mobile than any other consumers. So for us to not start and think mobile first is probably a miss. It's not that there's not a ton of television viewing, there clearly is, but there's something very special about that screen in your hand that's very personal for everybody, but even more accessed and utilized for these consumers. So, I mean, I guess the answer to the question is we really put the consumer behavior and insights about how the consumer lives at the heart of it, and then we let the experience planning flow from what we know about what that consumer does and how they live. I think now, more and more, we've been talking a lot about this overconsumption of mobile in the marketplace with our clients, and more, there's an understanding, this concept, this consumer is leaning in harder than any other consumer, whether it be Hispanic or African American. It's extremely well known now. We get fewer questions about, is that really true? Because the data is so resounding across so many different sources that there's so much more activity happening on mobile. So this is, watching video on mobile, going online, texting, emailing, everything you could do on a mobile device is expounded when it comes to this consumer. So it's not so much about why, but about how. And so I think we start with knowing how the device is used has to then come into play with what is the best way to create an experience with the device. So we know that the device is going to be the first thing someone reaches for in the morning. If you have a special offer before someone's going to get in their car and drive somewhere, perhaps that's the best time to think about that day part and what messaging should happen and what experience you might want to have that is activated mobilely. Maybe somebody is in store, and we have worked with some of our clients to create image recognition apps. So if you're standing in the store aisle and you're trying to decide to buy one product over another and you want to be able to read the label and the product information in Spanish, wouldn't it be great if an app was able to translate that for you? So that would be very, store focused or at retail focused. And then if you're, if you're out and about and you're shopping, you're going to restaurants, knowing your location and where you want to go next is important. So potentially we should enable an experience that's triggered by location and has very specific geolocation or hyperlocal information. So it's the real solid understanding of what is the consumer doing in their day, how does mobile fit into that, and then how can we bring an experience from a brand into those specific parts of the day or the specific ways the user is actually using their device, which in our case we know is exponentially more than many other people are using their devices. I think there are a lot of reasons why Hispanics and African Americans are social super users. In the case of the U.S. Hispanic, it is, we know Latinos love to talk and communicate, and they have larger families, and so some of it is bringing you together and closing geographical gaps where people are, spread out. Some of it, I think, for these consumers is social is the chance to publish your own content. And we know now it's very commonplace. Consumers are content creators. They create content every day. But it's even more powerful, we think, for these consumers because really they don't have enough relevant content. And when other people aren't creating enough relevant content for you, the best thing to do is create your own. So I think it's really compelling to be a publisher and almost your own brand, and to be more likely to critique and to comment and to publish is something that has been shown in a lot of research about particularly U.S. Hispanics and also African Americans. It's a very vocal group. And so we know that this is happening. We know this consumer is more likely to want to share and to comment if what you have and if is a brand, what you're going to be sharing is of value and if it resonates. And so that's on us. We need to be relevant. We need to reach out in ways that are going to resonate with this consumer. And so finding that voice and being original and speaking, with original content and original thought is a really big deal. And, oftentimes you see brands trying to get it right, but if it's a translation or, it started from something that was happening for non-multicultural audiences and you just try and adapt, sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes you need an original voice. It's kind of like when brands were trying to appeal to millennials and they're using terms, like throwing the term "they" around, and millennials see that and they're like, "Really? Did you just try and do that? I mean, are you my grandma?" It just doesn't resonate well, and it's like nails on a chalkboard. So we really need to try not to be that. We need to be authentic, and we need to speak in a voice that will resonate. And so we're trying to do that in our interactions, knowing how prevalent social is. We're trying to create social interaction that is shareable and that is something that the consumer will feel like they get value from and they want to share with their friends, and that's what it's all about, because socialization is so big. We just need to be able to capitalize on it as brands. It's essential that they all work together. In fact, and oftentimes paid media is crucial. Depending on the platform that you're on, it is impossible to get any kind of reach if you don't use paid media. Right. And so I think they all very much work hand in hand. Paid media is going to help you amplify anything you're doing, so it becomes very essential. And then the idea is if you have really great content in owned areas, you can then help that paid media take wing and work harder for you. And then that's all on the content that you have and how relevant you are when people find you, whether it may be on your Facebook page, whether it may be on Twitter, Pinterest, wherever you're at, when they find you, if it's a relevant conversation and it's really good content that gets you excited, that's what helps power the earned media, which will then make every paid dollar just work harder. So, a lot of these terms start to blend together, right? There's a lot of different ways that you can talk about a brand creating original content and versus a brand sponsoring content. What we will say is video is hugely important for this consumer. When it comes to this concept of over-indexing and participation with media, video is enormous. And then the cross of video with mobile, we start seeing some of this cross together. Video plus mobile plus social, it's like a triple threat for this consumer. A couple years ago, this is now a couple years old, I bet the gap still exists, and it's probably been a year and a half, but a third of Hispanics were on Netflix at a time when non-Hispanics were still like 15%. That's a crazy gap that shows the hunger for video. So we know that exists. So we're clearly trying to find the ways to scale up video, whether it be buying just paid media surrounding video, which is a huge play, and then like you're saying, creating special integrations and creating video as brands so that we know we're capitalizing on the fact there's such a hunger for video, and then it's just we need to get it right. And so I know that's what your company is all about. How do you get that right? How do you create video that is something special, and it is informed, and it is culturally relevant, and it has nothing to do as much with language as it does that this is just really great content that people love. And I think that's what everybody is after. And we're trying to be at the heart of working with many different partners, and including our own internal production, to produce video in that way, and a whole host of different formats, going from 6 seconds all the way up to 2 minutes. Depending on the brand, it's telling a story through video, which we definitely think is very powerful. I think it's probably more thinking about what is the right experience to create, and how does that experience get delivered. And video becomes a very important part of delivering an experience that will resonate, because we know these consumer groups are so hungry for video, absolutely powered by being younger. And the younger the consumer is, the more they may not be spending that much time with traditional television, but they're going to be spending time, like you're talking about, with other devices and other screens. And so then the focus is on understanding how that consumer views and consumes and spends time with content, and then we need to cover all of our bases. And sometimes you're right. We talk about first, second, and third screen. It should probably be reversed in a lot of cases, and particularly with multiculturals, who are a huge segment of millennials. You probably should be calling mobile the first screen.
So, to end on a fun video note, near and dear to my heart, some of the viewers may know that NGL Media puts on an event called the Latino Digital Video Summit. We just did one back in November. And one of the biggest hits at this year's event was we featured some Latino Viners and YouTubers. And the Viners in particular, for those of you, hopefully everyone at this point knows what Vine is, 6-second videos, just was off the charts. People loved it. And interestingly, in addition to doing videos that are just, for themselves, lots of these Viners, believe it or not, are doing 6-second videos that incorporate brands in a variety of interesting ways. And one Viner who really stood out and that we featured is a gentleman named David Lopez. At this point, I think, I don't want to misquote, but I think he has between 4 or 5 million followers on Vine. And so, Marla, what I'd love to do is play a couple of videos from David Lopez and what he's done with brands, and just get your opinion on it. See what you think, and hear your thoughts about Vine and some of these other burgeoning social content platforms, whether it be Snapchat or Instagram or any of these that are out there now. Would love to hear your point of view on that. And I'll just play, and we'll see what you think, okay?
Sounds good.
What's the Wi-Fi password?
Dude, I need your car.
I'm not gonna give you my car. I don't even know you.
You're a creep.
What a great guy. Hey, can you take a picture of him?
Yes.
Thanks, buddy.
What a nice guy.
What?
You're not ready? I'll be in the car.
What?
Well, you took forever.
I want it. Tell me why.
Okay, that was pretty cool stuff. I would love to hear your opinion about this, and fire away.
Okay, so this is really exciting. It's awesome. The concept of appealing to millennials is on the tip of everybody's tongue, and that's exactly what's happening here with creators like David, and there are a whole host of social influencers. It's now becoming bigger and bigger to think about not just traditional celebrities, but these are celebrities. Truly to millennials, they respond so much to his talent and talent like him that's becoming a bigger and bigger, more scaled avenue for brands, that it's really exciting to see more and more talent like this that appeals to African American, that appeals to Hispanics, because they're really going to get it right. It's authentic because it's directly from someone who seems to be like a friend, just like them, except they've gotten really good at what they do, and they're amassing these huge followings. So we really are thinking hard about how to get involved with talent like David in a lot of different places, because what he's creating is really powerful. It's garnering really solid audiences, and whenever you have a large audience of someone who's engaged with content, of course, brands want to follow that. So particularly when you're talking about these millennial multiculturals, it's really compelling, and it's something we think it has a lot of promise. And his were particularly fun. They're really engaging.
Cool. Any thoughts about Vine specifically? I mean, it's amazing to me how in 6 seconds they're able to typically communicate a beginning, a middle, and end to a story, and in this case, integrate brands as organically as possible. Sometimes it's just for a split second, and then they mention it in the comments or they hashtag it just to tie everything together. What do you think about the art of creating branded entertainment in a medium that is so concise and that it's only 6 seconds? Any thoughts?
Yeah, it's funny. I just read an article this morning in one of the trades about some guy is predicting Vine it's gonna be dead in another year because it is just too hard to do anything compelling in 6 seconds. So that's interesting. He's definitely trying to be compelling. I could see that, but I think there is opportunity at all different lengths. I think there are a lot of Viners that you're actually able to get something across in 6 seconds. I think it depends on. You can't just start doing it. I do think there's an art to it. It has to be very well thought out and specific, but particularly for multicultural consumers, because they're so hungry for content and are so excited about video. I think video at any length can work. It's just a matter of getting it done well, whether it's at 6 seconds, 15 seconds, 30, or whatever the case may be. And I mean, I think he shows some examples that you can get your point across and be really funny and engaging and do it in really short form. But that's why he's garnering the followers he is. He's getting good at that, and that takes a lot of work. It's not by accident.
It's true. Marketers are going to love Snapchat, how that disappears instantaneously. I think actually it'll show up in your feed and it stays there for about 24 hours. If you don't view it, then it disappears. But once you do view it, it goes away.
Right, true.
Any thoughts about some of these other burgeoning platforms?
I think they're probably going to keep iterating. I think that Snapchat wants to be seen as a more compelling and realistic way that you can tell a story and to get a message across. And right now, the presumption has been it's very phantom, it's quick, it's in and out. And I think that they're going to work to change that in order to be able to grow and to monetize. They're going to have to do what every other platform has. You start with a certain amount of ad products, and then you keep iterating off of that, so that you welcome brands in different ways. I could definitely see that happening with them. You see it happening with Tumblr. You're going to see it happening with Pinterest. I think all of them will keep iterating so that it becomes multiple ways that brands can engage and can build content for their platforms.
It's all about the balance of staying authentic while still having a business model, isn't it, Marla?
It really is.
Okay, Marla. So thank you so much. Marla Skiko, Executive Vice President of Digital Innovation at SMG Multicultural. We loved having you. We'd love to have you back. And any final words, Marla?
No, thank you for having me. That was really great. These are awesome topics. I'm so glad you're tackling them, and thanks for making us a part of it.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, Marla.